Hey, have you ever thought about how governments can shift from democracy to something a lot more controlling?
You mean like authoritarian regimes or even fascism?
Yeah, exactly. It's really interesting and kind of alarming how these systems rise and function.
It's crazy. So what exactly is fascism?
Well, fascism is this far-right authoritarian ideology that puts the nation above everything else. It emphasizes extreme nationalism, militarism, and centralized
Right.
control over society.
So it's like the state's way or the highway?
Exactly. There's no room for opposition. They suppress dissent, control the economy, and expect absolute loyalty to the state. It's all about power.
But doesn't authoritarianism do that too?
Well, yes, but authoritarianism is broader. It refers to any system where power is centralized,
Oh,
whether
okay.
left wing or right wing.
So fascism is a specific type of authoritarianism?
Exactly. Fascism relies heavily on nationalism and suppressing opposition.
Got it. So how did fascism even start?
Well, it emerged in the early 20th century after World War I. Countries were facing economic instability, and people feared the rise of communism.
So they were looking for strong leaders to fix things?
Yeah, precisely. For instance, Benito Mussolini in Italy during the 1920s founded the first fascist state. He promoted nationalism and dictatorship.
And then Adolf Hitler came along?
Yup! In the 1930s, Hitler led Nazi Germany, blending fascism with extreme racism and aggressive expansion
Right.
policies.
It's wild how quickly these ideas spread.
Yeah, and not just in Europe. Francisco Franco in Spain, and variations of authoritarianism appeared in Latin America and Asia too.
So what are the core principles that define fascism?
Well, first off, extreme nationalism. The nation is seen as superior, and outsiders are often scapegoated.
Blaming others for internal problems.
Exactly. Then there's authoritarian leadership. A single leader or party holds absolute power.
No checks and balances.
Right. Militarism is another key point. They emphasize military strength and use violence to silence opposition.
So dissent isn't just discouraged, it's dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. They also control the economy, often favoring corporate alliances.
Like the government and big businesses are in cahoots?
Exactly. And they suppress opposition. Free speech, opposition parties, and press freedoms are restricted or eliminated.
Sounds like a total clampdown on civil liberties.
Yep. And they use propaganda and indoctrination through media, education, and culture to promote state-approved messages.
So the people are essentially brainwashed?
In a way, yeah. The aim is to control how people think and ensure loyalty to the regime.
But wait, isn't that a bit of an oversimplification? Not every authoritarian regime uses outright brainwashing.
True, you're right. Maybe it's better to say they heavily influence public opinion through controlled media and education.
Yeah, that makes sense. So how do these regimes actually rise to power? Is it always through force?
Not always. Often, they exploit existing systems. Economic collapse is a big factor. High unemployment, inflation, people become desperate for solutions.
So they look for a savior figure?
Exactly. Political polarization also creates chaos, making it easier for extremist leaders to gain support.
And fear plays a role, right?
Yeah, they use fear and scapegoating, blaming minorities or external threats for society's problems.
It's like they're the reason we're struggling.
Precisely. And sometimes they manipulate democratic processes. They might rise to power legally through elections, but then dismantle democratic institutions.
That's sneaky and terrifying.
Yeah, it's a gradual erosion of democracy. Before you know it, freedoms are gone.
Are there modern examples of this?
Well, some modern regimes show authoritarian tendencies without being fully fascist, like Russia, Venezuela, or Turkey. They suppress opposition and control media to some extent.
Right. So the lines can blur.
Exactly. It's not always black and white.
You know, I wonder about the consequences. What happens to a society under fascism?
Oh, lots of negative outcomes. There's suppression of rights, freedom of speech, press, political opposition, all destroyed.
And wars, right?
Yeah, fascist regimes often engage in aggressive expansion, like World War II.
Economic instability too?
Definitely. Government control can lead to inefficiency and corruption.
And human rights violations?
Tragically, yes. Fascist regimes are responsible for atrocities like genocide, forced labor, mass imprisonment.
It's horrifying to think about.
It really is. That's why it's important to recognize the warning signs.
What are some of those signs?
Well, demonization of opponents and attacks on the media.
Like labeling journalists as enemies.
Exactly. Also, erosion of democratic institutions, manipulating elections, packing courts.
So undermining checks and balances.
Right. Calls for law and order that target specific groups is another sign.
Using the law to oppress.
Yes, and increased state control over media and education.
Controlling the narrative.
Exactly. Lastly, using military or police to suppress protests.
That's when things get really dangerous.
Absolutely. Recognizing these signs can help prevent history from repeating itself.
So what can people do?
Defending democratic institutions, free speech, and human rights is key. Staying informed and active in the political process.
It's about not trading freedom for perceived security.
Exactly. It's tempting during times of crisis, but it's a slippery slope.
Well, this has been really enlightening.
Yeah, it's super important stuff. Understanding history helps us safeguard the future.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks for the deep dive.
Anytime. Let's keep these conversations going.